Hello everybody. So in my last Instagram post I showed some pictures of some popular Japanese swim baits that I was using or that I created with some molds, and actually one of the last YouTube video we did, or that I did, it actually was a little halibut caught in the harbor on one of these little guys. So what I wanted to do is show a how-to video on how I started making the molds for full-bodied swim baits. I know the last video, the last how-to with the plaster was for flat top swim baits that aren't full body but just had a flat top, so simply pour into the mold, pour into the plaster, and then sit that on top, sink it down, let it dry, and then you could pour your hot plastic in there and you were done. Well, with these, it's a little more complicated because they're full body, they're not a flat top, so I'm going to show you how we do that. But first, before I go into that, as you see, I have Legos in front of me, and so what I was coming across is having difficulty finding different size trays for the different size lures and molds I wanted to make. And so I was going through the house, looking through a bunch of different things, and came across Legos. Legos, with being solid plastic, the plaster doesn't stick to them, so that's obviously a win. And also with Legos, that it was kind of an aha moment, was you can add or take away pieces, and so you can very easily make your molds larger lengthwise, or wider, or even taller. And so even the first mold I made with them, I was sold on it. It was awesome. It worked perfect. And so that's one of the main differences you see here is I'm using Legos. Now for the bottom, since there is no bottom, with a tray, TV tray or dinner tray or food tray, whatever, you obviously have the bottom and you don't have to worry about it. But with Legos, there is no bottom. So you can either clamp a hardboard to the bottom, which if you want to make it look absolutely amazing on the bottom, go for it. Me, on the other hand, I don't care what the bottom of the mold looks like. So all I simply do is take duct tape, 4 strips of duct tape, and put them tight across the bottom. Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to make sure that it's stuck to the corners on underneath side. And this is going to be your bottom of the mold. Again, doesn't need to look beautiful, doesn't need to be perfect, just needs to be functional. Cheap, easy, fast. Okay. And voila. We are completely done with the bottom of the mold. Now flip it over, and you can see how the tape isn't quite stuck to each other, so I just take my finger and push that tape layers down, and now they're stuck. Push it down a little bit, make sure that tape is secure, and boom, simple. Within a few seconds you have the bottom of your mold. Now before I actually get into pouring the plaster, I wanted to note, as I noted before, with the other swim baits with the flat top, you simply pour the plaster in, then you take your lure, and as I did, stuck the tail in first and put the body in second, and let that dry, and then you take your hot plastic when you're done, pour it in, let it dry, boom, you have your lures. With the full-bodied one, it's I shouldn't say much more complicated, but it's definitely more complicated. I started with the number of fails that I had. I started by putting the lure in straight down. What I found is that after I poured the plastic in, this piece or these tails are so thin and there's not much plastic there, you go to pull it out and it would just get stuck in there and it'd break the tail off. Tried to flip it over this way, same thing on the top. Tails were too thin, it would break right off. I failed about 6 or 7 different molds, couldn't quite figure it out. And then I started looking at a lot of the aluminum cast CNC aluminum molds that I see online, and it dawned on me that they are actually made with the lure sideways. And so I tried it and it absolutely worked perfect. But what it does is it makes it to where the plastic isn't, there isn't a lot of plastic, a lot of depth in the mold by turning it sideways. You see, length, when it's up like this, there's a lot of plastic going down. However, when you turn it sideways, it's very little. There's equal amounts of plastic on the top piece of the mold and even plastic on the bottom. And so it makes it a lot easier for that plastic to pull out of the mold once you've poured it. So again, that finally figured it out, and that's where I do it. Another thing that you need to make sure that you do when you do, this is actually going to be a 2-layered mold or a 2-piece mold, so that way we have full body, is you want to make sure you have a little dowel or a little rod or a little piece of pencil, whatever, to actually put into the first layer of your plaster. Because what that does is when you go to put the hot plastic in for this new lure, it will actually go in, you'll be able to push all the plastic in, but as the plastic shrinks, you need to add a little more plastic in there, so that way it doesn't create an air cavity in the lure itself, because as the plastic shrinks, it'll pull the plastic in and create air, and you don't want that. So what I do is you put this little piece in there, and as it shrinks, it's shrinking into this, but not into the plastic lure. And so with these, another reason why you have to do it 2 ways, not only with the full bodied, but I also found that when you just simply pour, you hold the mold vertically and you pour in the plastic, there wasn't enough pressure to get it all the way through the tail. So I did need to buy a plastic injector to put enough pressure to get that plastic all the way into the mold to create the full tail. Otherwise, it's like half a tail and it's worthless. So that being said, let's start mixing the plaster. With the plaster, again, if you've never used it or you're new to it, I would definitely follow the instructions on the package to get the right plaster to water ratio. But for me, since I've been doing them for quite a while now, I just basically, just do it by look and feel. So with this first layer, you want it to be not very liquidy, but almost like a creamy peanut butter, so you could set the lure in properly. And then the top layer is a lot more fluid, and because you don't need the lure to rest into it. But I'll just show you right now, and we'll get started. You definitely want to mix it all thoroughly. Try not to breathe in the plaster dust that comes up after you start mixing. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. Alright, so we're done with that. So now we'll go to pour. And as you can see in here, I've got 4 layers thick of Legos. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so with the first layer, what I try to do is get it to be about at the top of this second layer here before I put the lure in. That way I have equal amounts of plaster on the bottom part of the mold and equal part on the top. So that way the lure is centered in the mold. So go ahead and pour all this. Perfect. Alright, see how now that the plaster is almost flattened out, you can see it's right at the top of that second layer of Legos. Now I'm just bumping this a little bit to get as much of the bubbles out, or have the bubbles rise to the top as possible, because big bubbles can definitely ruin it. Small bubbles, not so much. Again, you don't need this to be perfect, you just need it to be functional so you could use it and catch fish. Just blowing all the some of these larger bubbles out. Okay, cool. Now, again, with this little dowel, what I'm going to do so the plaster doesn't stick to it, I'm going to take a little bit of oil and coat the entire thing. Now I'll go ahead and stick this into the plaster, about, again, halfway down. Pretty much in the center of this part right here. Push it down to where it's halfway in the resin, halfway sticking out. The top. Okay. Then, as I noted before, you want to take the lure and don't put it straight down, don't put it upside down, but we want to put it by the side. So we're going to take it, you put the front right up against that dowel, and just I just let it drop right in. Get that tail in there straight. Push it down a little bit, make sure it's equal parts in the plaster and equal parts above it. Okay, as you can see, half in, half out. Make sure that dowel is wanting to float up on me. I don't want it to float up on me. So as the resin hardens, I'm just gonna push this down a little bit, make sure it gets stuck right there with that lure. But as you can see, the lure is half in the plaster. The other half, when we pour it over the top, it'll cover it completely, and then it'll be a completed mold. So we'll give this an hour, and then we'll come back and show you how to do the top piece. Okay, so it's been an hour. We're ready to get ready to pour the top layer of this mold. Now, in order for the second part to work, you have to have some type of oil or release agent and some indentations in here so that the mold can lock in place. So what I do is I'll just take a drill bit, and I'm going to drill 6 holes in here, just again so that way the two pieces of the mold can lock together and not slide apart. So I'll just do, and again, they don't have to be holes, just small indentations. I just do 6. Okay, so those little indentations are done. So you can see they're not very big. Just enough for the two pieces to have something to latch together with, or to sit snugly against when you go to pour your plastic in. Now, in order for the top layer of plaster not to stick to that bottom layer, you need to add some type of release. And so I just use just furniture oil. I'm sure you could use like vegetable oil or olive oil or something like that. You just need to have a thin layer of oil down here to, again, prevent that next or top layer of plaster from sticking to the bottom one. Because if it does, it's, you know, you're going to have it's not going to open up. You're not going to have a mold. You're just going to have just a solid piece of plaster. So I just do, again, a really, really thin layer of oil on this. You don't need to do the lure, again, because that's not going to stick anyways, but definitely get that little dowel piece or wood, whatever you have in there. Get around everywhere, get around the tail. You can see how flimsy that tail is. It's not, that's why the other way of doing the mold with it set down straight in doesn't work well. Okay, get the oil in these spots. Get around the lure. Okay. That's good for that. Now we'll just make sure we get the holes good. Make sure there's oil in the holes. Okay, great. All done. So now all we need to do, last step, is pour. So what we'll do is with this second batch of plaster, this definitely needs to be more fluid than the first layer, because you want to make sure that it fills in all the cracks, all the little crevices in the lure. And if it's not fairly liquidy, it's not going to get in there, and you're just going to have just a bunch of air bubbles in there, and it's not going to fill the lure completely as you want, or as you see the original. So we'll go ahead and stir this first. Get this all ready. And try to make sure there's as little to no large clumps as possible. Okay, let's see. I need a little more liquidy than that, a little more loose or watery. Again, you want it watery so that way, again, it fills in all the voids, and you don't, and when you have it liquidy or watery running like this, that tail is free to sit in its natural state, or natural state. So you don't want it to, you don't want the thick plaster to bend the tail down. You just want it to be able to move freely and take its natural place. All right, that's good. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. Now we'll go ahead and pour, and watch how nicely this fills in. Beautiful. Now you might have seen the tail move a little bit, that's perfectly fine, because what we're gonna, and this is again why you want more watery plaster than you had with the first one. So now, same with the first one. Now we'll keep tapping. We'll start tapping this a bit, vibrating it, and you'll see all the larger bubbles come up, which is good. That's what we want. And by doing this, the tail is getting able to take its natural placement as it did before with, see, there's a large bubble coming up, bubbles coming up over here, over here. That's what you want. You want to get rid of all these large ones, all the spots where there was voids, all that. The vibration is causing the plaster to seep into all those voids and holes and cracks. Looks good, looking good. Not many holes at all. There's one more coming up right here, and I think right there. Yep. Do this for a little bit. Get those last two big bubbles out. There. You can blow them out a little one, or use a blowtorch, heat gun, whatever, to get those bubbles out. Just get them to pop. Oh, there's one more coming up on the left side of it right there. Alright, cool. So that's all done. That's it. Now what we'll do is, again, let that set for an hour or so, let it harden, and we'll come back and take it apart, take everything apart, and see our new full-bodied two-piece mold. Alright, been over an hour, moment of truth. Let's see how this thing turned out. I have a feeling it turned out alright. Alright, so again, you could either take the Lego pieces apart, Or what I do is I just kind of shimmy them, separate the pieces a little bit. So you can see how when I spread it, there's a little gap there. Same with over here, a little gap. Now if the corners crack or come apart, I don't worry too much about it because it really doesn't matter. Then I just kind of shimmy it out. So you can see the corner breaking there. Again, really doesn't matter to me. If you want it to be cleaner, you can just take the Lego pieces off or disconnect all the Lego pieces. But there's the mold itself. Now, let's see what we got inside. Up. Look at that. Perfect, nearly perfect, top and bottom. So there you go, there's the mold. Now this little piece is sticking out here because of that little piece in here. Actually, sorry, let me do it in the right direction. So there's that piece that matches up with this little piece right here. Just means it didn't go in the hole properly, but that's okay. And then you can usually just pop this dowel out. I'll open it up just a little bit, get some of the plaster away from the edges. Again, this is why you oiled it. And it should, I say should, pop right out. There you go. Alright, there you go. Now here's again why you wanted these little divots in here. So when you connect it to go to pour the plastic in, it doesn't shift at all. It's just locked into place. Now what you do is you just let this sit for about 24 hours to completely harden. And then what I'll do is I'll take the drill bit again and I'll go into here and I'll just kind of twist it to open the hole a little bit bigger, and then open this a little bit more so it's wide enough to have the injector hole fit. So you can see it doesn't fit right now, so I'll open that hole so the injector fits in. If you don't use the injector and you just pour the plastic in, gravity isn't enough to get the plastic before it cools down into the little thin tail area. So that's why you need the injector to kind of give it some little extra oomph and push it in there. And then once it pushes it in there, then you're left with basically a perfect replica of the original bait that you had in there. Hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed watching it. If you have any questions, let me know, or any comments, let me know. Otherwise, get to making some lures and catch some fish. Show the injecting part of the video. So how to actually make the plastic lures in here with obviously plastic and the injector. So again, all you'll need is the mold that you previously made out of plaster, gloves of course, because this is going to be super hot. Obviously the plastic, the heat stabilizer, you need your pigments. Again, this is like a pearl white with some silver, because that's pretty much my go-to color. You'll need one of these, either a Pyrex or this is an Anchor Hocking glass measuring cup, some ice water, and yeah, let's get started. But actually, before we get started, what I'm going to do, since I use the injector, and I have found that it is best to have this heated up. If you have like a side burner or something that you could keep this heated, or a heating plate, that would be ideal. So you keep this heated on that while you're working on everything else, heat, and then you heat the plastic, pour it in or suck it in, and it you know, it keeps the plastic in there melted longer, because the cooler this cylinder is, the faster the plastic after you heat it is going to harden, and you just have to keep reheating it. So I put this, I don't have a heating plate, I just put it in boiling water in my kitchen, get that heated up as hot as possible, and then when I'm ready to, when all the plastic in here is ready to actually inject, I'll go get it and then show you that process. So without further ado, I'll be back. I'm gonna go get this heated and then we'll work on our plastic. Okay, so with the plastic, especially the saltwater formula, it says in the instructions to shake for about a minute, because all the hardener actually supposedly settles to the bottom. So I'll give this a shake for a little bit. I've already shaken it for probably a minute or two before I started the video, but we'll give it a little more of a shake just to make sure we're good. That should be good enough. I never really do much more than maybe 20, 15 to 20 lures at a time, or plastics at a time, and that's roughly about half a cup. I can get about 15 to 20, so we'll do probably about the same here. I'm gonna do half a cup of the Plastisol, and then before I even start heating it up, because I know I'm gonna have to heat it up, use the heat stabilizer. And what this does is it elongates or prolongs the time before the Plastisol itself starts to yellow. The more Plastisol heats and keeps getting reheated, the more apt it is to start turning yellow from reheating. So this, again, a few drops of this kind of just elongates or delays that yellowing process a little bit. How much longer? I don't know, but I do know that it does work. So I'll go ahead and mix that in, and then we'll go ahead and start heating this up. And then through trial and error, I have found that with about half a cup of Plastisol, my initial heat time is about 2 minutes. Anything less than half a cup, I'll do initial heat time of about 1.5 minutes, and then after that initial one, you'll stir and then give it about 30-second increments until it gets to the appropriate or the desired consistency. Now with this, being injected into this mold, I want it to be very, very fluid. Sometimes with the when I pour the regular swim baits with the flat tops, it doesn't have to be really fluid. It can be sort of thick because I'm not injecting it, but when you're injecting it into this mold, you definitely want it to be as fluid as possible so it gets into all the crevices of this mold. So you can see all the crevices in here and the thin tail. You want to make sure that you have, again, as fluid as possible so that way it can get into all those crevices. So we'll go ahead and heat this up for 2 minutes to start, and then heat it about 30 seconds in 30-second increments after that until we get the desired consistency. We'll let that go for a little bit. We'll be right back. Alright, let's take a look at what we got here. Put my glove on. And for the sake of this video, I'm not wearing a respirator mask. I have a fan blowing pretty strong to my right of me, so I'm not going to use that so I could talk while I'm doing this, but it is a wise decision when you're working with Plastisol to wear a mask, even if you have a fan on. But you can see it's steaming, and granted that's plastic, so you don't want to smell that, obviously. So we'll just give this a quick stir. You can see how it's still white down at the bottom, starting to clear up at the top. Give that a little stir. Still got a ways to go. But I stop after 2 minutes because if I go any longer, it's possible that it could yellow. I know it hasn't done it in the past when I do it at 2 minutes, but you never know. Okay, give it another 30 seconds. Be right back. Alright, let's give this a check. Should be 1 or 2 more. Yep, one or two more and we should be good. But one thing to note is there are bubbles in there, and to do this 100% properly, from what I've seen on other channels, is to not have the bubbles. To make an absolutely perfect lure, you can get or purchase and use a vacuum sealer. So you take this, you put it in the sealer, and it vacuums all the air out. But since I'm not selling any of my lures, I just use it personal use, or have it for personal use. I don't vacuum. I don't worry too much about a lot of the bubbles. I'm using pigments that pretty much require no, or don't require any clear lures, so I don't worry too much about the bubbles. But we'll give it another 30 seconds. That should be good. Here we go. Okay, let's take a looky here. What's that? Okay, so we're good. We're getting there. So I like the consistency, very fluid. So now I'm going to add the colors. So for me, pretty much all of mine are relatively the same. About 90% of this pearl white and 10% of the silver. So get that white in there. Put that aside. Get my silver. A little bit, not too much. Get that in there. A tiny bit more. Okay. That's it for that. I'll go ahead and stir this in. Now again, I'll leave a link in the description for where you can get all these, but I just use basic mica pigment that you'd use in like resin or soaps or nail polish, anything. Just and it doesn't have to be specific for lure making. So yeah, I get these on, you can get them on any kind of retailer, whether online or hobbies, hobby stores, whatever. But I found that, just regular mica pigment works fantastic. So looking really good there. So now what I'll do is I'll put this in the microwave for one more 30-second increment, and I'll go get the injector and we'll start going. Be right back. Alright, here we go. So this is super hot, it's been boiling, it is ready to go. Put my other glove on. Okay, open this up. First thing I'm gonna do is take my cooking oil. Could be Pam, whatever kind of cooking oil, or just some type of oil to make as a releasing agent. Make sure you get it into the tail. Okay, that's good. And we'll go ahead and close this up. So again, we'll take this crimp, go ahead and tighten this up. Sorry, not in view. There we go. Alright, that's ready. Now for when I inject, I've seen some videos where they suck it. They'll have the Pyrex or whatever you're measuring cup, and they'll suck it out and then they'll squeeze. I don't like to do that. It's very messy in my opinion. After I get this top off, so I'll remove the top, pull this injector all the way open so it's all the way extended. Set that aside real quick. Then I'll get my color or my plastic, give it one last stir. Okay, put that screwdriver aside. Pour it in. Okay, put that aside. Put this top back on and get the air out. Okay, and then squeeze till you can't squeeze no more. Top it off and let it sit. Meanwhile, I actually should have something to sit under this plastic right here, because then you gotta squeeze all this plastic back in, because otherwise it's gonna harden in there by the time it's ready. If I were doing this properly right now, you would have multiple molds to pour into, but I only have one right now that is doing this full body for this particular lure. And so I have to keep putting the plastic back in. Again, in a perfect world, you would have multiple molds. So you do like 6 molds. So you have to heat that plastic up the least amount of times. But yeah, I don't have that right now. So I'm just showing you how to do it one at a time. Sorry about that. So again, what we'll do now is we take this plastic, put it back into the microwave. So we're ready to heat that back up. We'll go ahead and open this clamp. Open this up. Voila! Look at that. Perfect. Nearly, well, it's got to cool down. I forgot that it wasn't cooled down enough. So you gotta let that plastic cool down. And then comes right out. And there you go, you got your full body mold. I'll stick that in the water and do one. Let's do another one. Get my cooking spray. Don't need a lot, just need enough to get in the crevices. Go ahead and clean some of that out a little bit. Alright, let's do 30 seconds on the heat. Go ahead and clamp this. Set that right there. Put the gloves back on. Okay. Can already tell we're gonna need to heat it up a little more. Just that chunk cooled down quite quickly. Alright, so we'll go ahead and heat that up for another 30 seconds. And we'll be able to pour another. Again, to emphasize, it is smartest and best to have multiple molds ready to pour, not just one. But again, I only have one of the ones that I really wanted to pour right now, so that's where we're at. Alright. Mix that. Ooh, that's looking good. Okay. Go ahead and pour this. I'm only going to pour enough to make one lure this time. I'm not going to pour the whole thing in there. So that's good. Set that aside. Put this lid back on. Get the air out. Okay. And pour away. Get it until you get to the top there. Make sure it's coming out the top. Give it a little room, because again, the plastic will shrink. And so you can see the bubble coming out, which is good. That means all the air is coming out. And as the plastic shrinks, it's hardening. So once it stops shrinking, you know it's at least to the point to where it's not flowing anymore. And then you can wait for a minute or two and open it up and see what we got. this clamp off. Still tacky. You can still see it's tacky right there, so not quite ready yet. Let that sit for a little bit. And actually, one thing to note, I don't recall if I had it in the video when I made these, but I put on the tail there's a vent hole or a little drilled opening, because you need that for the air to escape, so that way the plastic can completely fill the lure cavity. I'll show that to you when I open it here in a moment, in case it wasn't in that first video. I don't think it was. I think I started doing that after, but we'll take a look here in a second. Alright, that should be good enough. So we'll go ahead and open this up. There we go. So this is what I was talking about, that little slot in here that allows the air to escape out the bottom. But there you go. Let's see if it comes out. There you go, coming out. Beautiful. And there you have it. Full body plastic lure. It's plaster of Paris. Put it in the water. And there you have it. And I'll come back when these have cooled down a bit and show you how to, basic trimming. Not really much to it, but show you how I do that. Back in a little bit. Alright, so I wasn't going to do these at first, but I'm going to do them now because I think it'll make for better footage and showing you an example of how this actually works. But these are actually a different mold. These lures don't have any ribs or any creases on them, so I'm actually going to go ahead and inject into these. These have the little air spouts too, so I'm going to inject that into these so you can see that it does work really well. The other ones with the ribs, it's not the mold, and there's a reason why I didn't make more molds. I don't really like that lure, but we'll try it with these and just see. That way you can see how clean the pour is, or how clean the lure comes out afterwards. So I'll go ahead and pour, same process, pour this in here, pour the plastic in the injector. Should have enough plastic for these two. If not, we're in trouble. Alright, go ahead there, cover it up. Shoot, that's some. Okay, cover it up. Go ahead and get the air out a bit. Okay, like that. Go ahead and crimp it. Totally wasn't prepared to do this, but whatever, sometimes you just do it. Alright, now go ahead and inject that into there. Okay, next one. Again, you want to push even when you feel resistance, so you know it went all the way through. Add a little bit on the top, so you know that when it shrinks, it goes all the way down in. There's no air pockets. Then you let it sit. You can see it's coming down the bottom, which is proper. It's supposed to come out of that air pocket, or out of that air chamber. And we just wait. And you can see that it's starting to yellow because we've heated up too many times now. So the heat stabilizer does work. It's just I had to heat this stuff up a lot to keep going, and that's why I was saying it's good to have like 6 molds that you can inject into at one time, so you don't have to inject, then reheat, inject, reheat, inject, reheat, because it again really accelerates that yellowing. If I would have had 6 of these, or numerous ones, we would have been done with this entire jar and with no yellow. That the white or the silverish would have stayed proper, but oh well. Again, the goals of the video is just to show how to do the full body plastic injection into the mold, plaster mold. Alright, that should be good. Let's see here. See how the plastic comes out the bottom, which is perfect. Okay, open this up. Stuck a little, but I'm gonna break off. There you go. There you have it. That's a better looking lure. That's the full body plastic lure from Plaster of Paris mold. Video part 2. So again, we'll put this in the water, we'll come back and trim. Alright, let's go ahead and trim these up. Again, this one, there's reasons why I don't use this one. I just don't like the way it turns out. That one's better. But yeah, so you can see here's the round part where the head is, so I just cut that part off where the mold had its funnel. Go cut all these little pieces off that are hanging out. Then I just trimmed this little air vent piece off, like such. That's done. A little more right there, a little more right there. Okay, that one's done. Same with this one. The head ends about right here, so we'll cut that off right there and just kind of round this end. Okay, this is what it's supposed to look. That orange one's what it's supposed to look like. We'll cut that little air vent off too. And again, just for the video, I'm not going to get crazy into the trimming. Just get the main parts of it that need to be trimmed. See, it's a little round on this side still. Again, you get the idea. You see what you're supposed to do. It's all that matters. Trim this top a little bit, get that little part off. So there's mimic of that one. Pretty stinking close. And then here, this is a 4. This isn't quite the same one. That one, this one's a little longer, but it mimics that one. So this is the 3-inch. This is, I think, the 4.2 inch, whatever. I don't have the default one that I molded off of, but yeah. So there you go. That's how you make full-bodied plastic lures in the plaster mold with an injector. I know it wasn't a perfect video, but I hope you learned something. If not, my apologies. But again, I'm not a huge fan of the full body stuff. If you've seen most of my videos, it's mostly these flat top lures. They work just fine for me. I really like the action of this type of lure. I'm not so fond of the action of this lure, but again, for the sake of making the part 2 of that first video on making the mold, I again got requests to make the actual pouring of it or the injection of it. So there it is. Thank you for watching. Take care. Go get some. You.